So as we begin the month of May, which is a month where traditionally we honour Mary by erecting May altars in our homes and in our schools, and by praying the family rosary before the altar, I just want to say a few words about this great tradition which is sadly dying out. Our Lady is so important in our times. Throughout the course of human history, God has sent Mary to warn mankind to turn away from sin and back to Him. And each time she has given us the answer to all the problems in our world, the Holy Rosary. Mary is not an optional extra in our spiritual life. She is essential to God's plan for the salvation of the world. God chose to enter the world through the Virgin Mary, making her the vessel through which His grace enters the world. And He continues to come to us through Mary even in our own times. And so when we go to Mary, we always find Jesus. Mary never leads us astray. She always leads us to her Son, Jesus. St. Maximilian Kolbe said that we must never be afraid of loving Mary too much, because no matter how much we love her, we'll never come close to loving her as much as Jesus does. So if we've neglected our devotion to Mary, this May is a great time for us to renew it. Pope Francis has called on the whole Church to pray the Rosary every day during this month of May. And he's asked us, if possible, to pray the Rosary every evening at 5 o'clock Irish time, so that the entire Church will pray together as one voice. The Holy Father began things yesterday evening, and he'll finish off this month on the 31st of May in the Vatican Gardens by praying the Rosary at the Grotto of Our Lady of Lourdes. So maybe you could erect a little May altar in your own home and resurrect the family Rosary again if it's been neglected in recent times. And just to finish, I'll share one little story that I read about the May altar and the great power of praying to Our Lady. The great French saint, St. John Vianney, or the Curé of Ars as he was known, was renowned for having the gift of being able to read souls in the sacrament of confession, as well as many other spiritual gifts which had been granted him by God. Father Trochu, in his book on the life of the great saint, tells the story of the French cleric by the name of Abbé Guimet, who met a lady on a train who was in deep mourning following the death of her husband. This lady's husband had been an unbeliever for most of his life, and so she prayed unceasingly for him to return to God. But before her prayers were answered, he took his own life by drowning himself. And so she was in dark despair at the thought that his soul might be lost for all eternity, and she didn't know who to turn to. The abbey told the lady that he was on his way to Ars to see the holy priest who lived there, and so she asked if she could join him in the hope that she might find some peace there. And so when they arrived at the village of Ars, the priest led the lady to the square beside the church, and just as they arrived, the Curé of Ars appeared. And as he walked through the square on his way to the church, the lady followed the example of the crowd and went down on her knees. And to her amazement, the Curé, who had never met the lady before, stopped in front of her and whispered into her ear, "He is saved." The woman was startled by this, and so he repeated, "He is saved." But when the lady looked back at him with a look of disbelief, the Curé repeated again, "I tell you, he is saved. He is in purgatory, and you must pray for him." Between the parapet of the bridge and the water, he had time to make an act of contrition. Our Blessed Lady obtained that grace for him. Remember the shrine that you put up in your room during the month of May. Though your husband professed to have no religion, he sometimes joined you in prayers. This merited for him the grace of repentance and pardon at the last moment. The next day, the lady met Abbé Guimet in the village, and she was completely transformed. She told him that she'd been in complete despair because she was certain that her husband was condemned to hell for all eternity. But the Curé of Ars told her that he was saved, and that she will meet him again in heaven. And she declared to the abbey, "I am cured of my despair." So even though this lady's husband had been an unbeliever for most of his life, because he had prayed before the May altar erected by his wife in their home, Our Lady obtained for him the grace of repentance at the moment of death, and his soul was saved. That's the power of our prayers to Mary. There is nothing she cannot overcome when we turn to her with confidence. So I'd encourage you to erect a May altar in your home. It doesn't have to be elaborate. A simple statue of Our Lady with some flowers and maybe a candle will suffice. And pray the Holy Rosary before the altar every day during this month of May, and see how Mary will transform your life and the life of your family. We now profess our faith in the one true God.